That time again, that time when we take a seat in our favorite booth to discuss mental health in the church and potentially find out that we ain't all there.
We're not okay.
No surprise there. I'm joined by Greg and Ken. I'm your host, Chris, and this is Three Pastors Walk Into a Bar. Been a couple of weeks.
Sure feels that way.
Yeah, it has. Mm-hmm. Like it has actually been probably 2 weeks since we recorded.
Yeah.
One, hasn't it? We've just been pushing out old ones because we're lazy. We're lazy. You know.
And busy.
Yeah, busy because in there too. I guess you can say busy for sure. So we take a couple of weeks off and then we decide to jump right into mental health, huh?
Yeah, jump right back into the
we're just gonna
deep end where we got out.
Jump right in there. Jump right on there. We're pleased today to have Lisa Hargrove with us today. How you doing, Lisa?
I'm doing great.
So I've got this litany of stuff here that I'm supposed to read. So you graduated in 1998 with a bachelor's in art psychology.
Yes.
I want to know what that's like. I've never heard of that before, but I bet it's fascinating.
It is. It's called a self-initiated major, so it wasn't posted as a major.
So you made it up.
I made it up.
You made it up.
Quite literally.
I want to go. That's cool.
Interesting.
She's homeschooled.
No,
She's home college.
Actually, yeah. No, I had a passion for ceramics, pottery, and wheel-thrown pottery for that matter. And so it was just a really passionate thing that I picked up when I was in high school and didn't want to stop doing it. So I went off to college and started I thought I was going to be a teacher, and knew I wanted to help people. That was always like in my heart. And so after my first year of college, I was a running start student. So I came in with credits and ended up graduating in 3 years. And so I petitioned to incorporate my passion for art and psychology to put them together because
nice.
There are master's programs for art therapists. So
that's interesting. I don't think I've ever heard of that. I mean, I've heard of art being used in psychology, but
I did.
She made it up.
I did.
It's not real.
It's the art. It's the art of psychology.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it a thing now?
It is. Yeah.
That's cool.
Art therapy is a huge thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime anybody says anything about pottery, all I can think about is the movie Ghost.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's a good movie.
Well,
or
too many moons ago. Oh, okay, I got it.
Yeah. In fact,
There
that happened the other day when we were in the car and you guys asked to play Unchained Melody.
Yes.
Yep. That's all I could think about.
That came back to you.
Yep. So Ghost has been in my thoughts a lot
Ever
here lately,
since.
it seems like. You graduated in 2001 with a master's in LMFT. So tell everybody what that is.
Yeah. Well, the L stands for license. So I graduated with a marriage and family therapy degree, and you have to wait a period of 2 years and have more hours under your belt before you can sit for licensure. So anyway, went through that process, sat for licensure, passed the test.
Yeah. And that was at Seattle Pacific?
Yes.
You were there?
I was there
How
physically.
was it?
It was good.
Was it?
Yeah.
Good.
It was, I was 21 when I started that. So I was, pretty naive in my thinking, and also in my walk with the Lord, still just a baby Christian. And felt like, well, SPU is a Christian university.
Yeah. So they say.
Yeah. And at that point, when I went off to graduate school, I knew that I wanted to help people. And the only way I could do therapy would become licensed. So you can't do therapy unless you're a licensed therapist. And so anyway, the Lord led me there. And it was educational from a actually not Christian perspective.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, there's Christians there, but you certainly have to kind of know what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, for sure. So then you moved on from there. You worked at Compass Health in Everett, Washington for 6 years. You were a behavioral health case manager for Primera Blue Cross in Montlake Terrace.
Yep.
That's in Washington. You trained in emotionally focused therapy.
Yeah.
This is a modality that focuses on couples therapy.
Yeah. It's new. This is the newest training I've done. Still learning a lot about it. It's based on attachment. And so as a licensed therapist with the state, you have to do continuing education. So I'm constantly trying to find trainings and education that fit within my perspective as a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that emotionally focused therapy, EFT, really focuses on the attachment with couples and being able to reach to each other in those times that you're hurting. So it really, I think it has a lot to offer, actually, couples.
You're licensed in Washington?
And Idaho.
And Idaho.
I
okay,
did. I brought it here.
Good.
So
you're going to start. You want to start a practice?
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
I'm sorry. Am I jumping ahead? Is that something?
Probably.
So does EFT, does that cover what I've read about different attachment styles?
Yeah. It
or part of it?
It doesn't study that necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't study the styles of attachment. It more studies. It helps couples who have deep hurts, and especially like if they've hurt each other in their time of being married, which that happens.
What? Really?
Right. Yeah. So it truly helps them be able to basically express any of those hurts, any of the times that they felt disconnected, and kind of be able to reach towards their spouse and express that. And it gives the spouse partner an opportunity to actually be there, be present, listen, and help heal some of those wounds. So it's really helping focus on the attachment within the couple. But it is based off the early work of John Bowlby, who talked about parent-child attachment. So
it doesn't really have anything to do with RAD, so to speak, the active attachment disorder?
No, I mean...
Okay. That's something totally different.
Usually couples that have that end up in therapy.
Or jail.
Right. Yeah. Reactive attachment disorder. That's a really... my time at Compass Health, working with foster kids, I worked with a lot of kids that had really deep attachment wounds.
We've dealt with several families within the church that are still dealing with that.
Yeah, that's a really painful experience for a child. Yeah.
I guess I'm having trouble understanding how that works. So if you have a couple, what are the tools involved that help them to emotionally connect to one another?
Yeah. So a lot of times anger is what gets in the way. And so when one person or both people are quite angry and hurt, it actually helps them get past that anger to look at what's underneath it. So with the therapist, you basically help them start to think about where inside them you want them to think about what their thoughts are, and then where they feel that within them, and to when they start to feel that flight or flight response because they've been triggered by their spouse, the hurt, you help them recognize that so that they can begin to express those thoughts into words rather than in anger. So you basically help them get past that anger and dive deeper down into, I'm really hurt, and express why they're hurt or what's happening to them. So a lot of times when you lash out at someone, it's out of a deep hurt versus a sense of, what that person feels is anger. But if they can really see you as a hurting person, it softens them and they don't lash back in anger. Mm-hmm. So it's really being able to reach to the other person in your hurtness rather than in your anger.
So it's really more for couples who are not communicating.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
can't. They literally don't. All they are is angry. They don't have the ability to express their hurt because they're afraid if they express their vulnerability, they're going to be hurt again.
Yeah. What is typically the time frame?
Oh,
for something like that?
Yeah, good question. That depends.
Mm-hmm.
I would say at least. You're looking at a year.
That'd be the minimum
of therapy. If a couple comes in early enough and it hasn't deeply wounded and hurt each other, it might go quicker. It also depends on how willing they are to be vulnerable. So, yeah.
So if we're dealing with a narcissistic spouse, it could take forever.
Lifetime.
Yeah. Or the borderline spouse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we go too much further, I just want our audience to know that Lisa is taking the helm of our counseling ministry here at Alpha Baptist Church, and has already made some dramatic changes and got the rest of us excited about doing more, and getting more education, learning more. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Oh well,
Yeah.
I'm thrilled.
Yeah.
We're really trying to step it up a little bit to make sure that we're addressing this because there is an issue. We're going to be talking about quite a few issues in here. I did want to ask something though, because in our conversations and in like social media conversations, you hear the term narcissist being thrown around a heap.
Oh yeah.
And my concern is that we're going to utilize that so much that if anybody has one of 7 traits,
right,
they're automatically going to be a narcissist.
Yeah.
What exactly is it that what's the borderline? Like at what point do you cross over from having, 2 or 3 traits of being a narcissist to you're potentially a narcissist to you are definitely a narcissist?
Yeah, don't you wish there was a blood test?
Yeah, it would be nice. Yeah.
That's why they call it social sciences. Yeah, there's no blood test. Yeah, I think you would get a lot of different answers. I don't think there's any one person that would give you the same answer to that question. Unfortunately, I didn't bring the DSM with me, so I don't have it here in front of me. But
DSM.
Oh, Diagnostic Statistical Manual.
I'd call it DSM too.
Yeah, I think we're on version 6.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my.
Yeah. When I was in school, it was version 5, so I don't know all the version 6 yet. I probably should get a new book. Yeah, in my practice, post school and post being a mother and wife and all of those things, I don't take insurance, so I don't diagnose. I find it's a way of communicating with another professional or another human what we're kind of looking at. It's kind of a quick way to give an assessment of the problems at hand. But ultimately, like all of us could be diagnosed with something, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, the narcissism, the other one that's thrown out there is borderline personality disorder.
Yeah.
You know, and women will get categories with that. And
Bipolar.
You
hear bipolar a heap too.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
There's diagnosis from my perspective is not helpful. It locks someone into this dysfunctional behavior, and that's not how God looks at it. So it's one of the reasons I don't want to take I don't want to label someone. I I don't feel like it's helpful. I don't feel like it's even helpful to them to put a label on them. But that said, there are times that it is helpful. There is dysfunction. We're in a fallen world. We're broken. But there is no blood test. So what one therapist might see as a diagnosis is not what another person's going to see. So.
Explain the insurance payment that you're talking about.
Right. So the insurance world.
Dun, 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 dun.
The machine.
Yeah. So, I mean, back in the day, insurance, based on the diagnosis, would only allow so many therapy sessions. So,
Okay.
and if you don't have a diagnosis, you can't get paid, like no therapy sessions are paid for. So, you know, if I will for clients, if they want to submit what is called a super bill to their insurance company to get reimbursed themselves, they have to pay me out of pocket, but they can, as I'm an out-of-network provider, submit it. I will give them a diagnosis, but they have to understand that that diagnosis stays with them for the rest of their life.
Via the paperwork.
It's in the system,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So, anyway, you try and do the lesser evil when you're submitting those types of diagnoses. I don't know many therapists. It would have to be really severe to actually give a narcissistic personality disorder diagnosis.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that question, kind of getting back to the point I was trying to make, in today's society, like you were saying, you hear the term narcissist, you hear the term
Borderline?
Or bipolar.
personality disorder,
Right, any
bipolar.
Yeah.
You hear a lot of that. And when you hear that from, say, a counselor or a therapist or, even like a person that you trust online, it's got to be difficult if you feel like you're on the receiving end of that. I wasn't really as much talking about diagnosing a person for their sake. I was really kind of talking about, if you are living with a person who someone has told you that they are bipolar,
Right.
how can you navigate that? Is there a way that you can look at that and say, yeah, I mean, I don't really believe that. They have some characteristics and there's some issues there, but they're certainly not a narcissist, right?
Right.
There has to be like some way that the average person can take some comfort. I mean, it's easy to say, well, we don't want to diagnose because then, we put labels on people. Well, labels help sometimes,
Right?
Yeah. and sometimes if you are in a situation where you're living with, say, for instance, a narcissist, it would be great if someone could tell you, yeah, you're living with a narcissist, you need some help.
Right.
Or, no, someone has told you you're living with a narcissist and that's not actually true. You need to learn how to deal with stuff as a couple.
Yeah. Yeah. I see where you're coming from. Living with a narcissist or someone who has any personality disorder, is quite miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's going to feel really miserable. So yeah, if you have a couple come in and someone has some personality disorders are people who've been deeply wounded in their childhood, likely have had a lot of abuse, trauma. You don't just wake up one day and are a narcissist. This is a lifelong experience that this person has had that has kind of culminated to this point in adulthood. You have to be 18 to be diagnosed with a personality disorder. Children are not diagnosed with them. So that tells you it takes 18 years to go through a lot of trauma and wounds. So yeah, you have, and in all reality, we tend to match or marry someone who's equally as emotionally healthy as ourselves. So unfortunately, someone who's going to marry a narcissist is probably pretty unhealthy themselves. To be able to be attracted to that kind of person. So then you're sitting with two very wounded people who probably both have personality disorders. So yeah, for some people, the label probably helps. For me as a therapist, and especially as I've gone into more of the biblical counseling and just understanding who I am as, God's creation, who God is, my hope in counseling is to instill hope in everyone I sit with. Like, God is infinitely bigger than any of us here. And I'm always hopeful for his work and his hand in our hearts.
Yeah.
Whether you're a narcissist or whoever you are, I think anything is possible.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Is it
Yeah.
helpful to think of these things in terms, more in generalized terms, like she's an introvert, he's an extrovert? That just kind of describes their characteristics, their personality a little better in a specific way than...
Well, you're kind of getting
a
into
diagnosis.
personality traits at that point. I mean,
Yeah.
you might as well just start administering tests, right? Personality
Is it
tests.
a blood test?
Is that a thing?
Yeah. Seeing people as introverted, extroverted, I mean, couples are going to be, you're going to see opposites. That's just, to have two extroverted couples is pretty extraordinary. That's very unlikely.
I guess I was thinking in terms of a spectrum,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You can have tendencies, you can have behaviors, then you can have
Right.
obsessions, addictions.
Right. Yeah. And personality disorders are definitely the obsessions. That's the extreme. And that's, therapists tend to give those diagnoses, or people tend to give those diagnoses when they're completely, utterly frustrated with this person or client. Like when you have a client that you're just like tearing your hair out and you're just like, oh my gosh, like we're not getting anywhere. I want to fire them, right? You hope they fire you. You want to say something, please fire me. That tends to be the personality disorders because
Of the therapist in that case, right?
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it just seems to me that there's so much. It's kind of like the information age has just given everybody a therapy license, and it's like if somebody goes online to express some kind of heartache that they have, then in the comments you have 50 people diagnosing this person because they can get an old copy of a DSM online.
Right.
And so people have to understand that mental health is just like any health care, right? It's easy for you to get, the Backwoods Doctor book and become a doctor. But you should be careful about throwing out diagnoses.
Yes.
And just don't do it at all.
Yeah.
Your approach is actually right on target for people that are not therapists.
Yeah.
If you're not a therapist, there's no reason for you to need a diagnosis.
Right.
You just know that they're a person that's hurt.
Yeah.
And that's all you really need to know.
Right.
Because what are you going to do with the diagnosis? Are you going to start prescribing stuff? Or are you going to start going through a therapy process? I mean, you don't know anything about that. So, it is, I can't tell you how many times I've had guys sit in my office or ladies sit in my office and they go, man, I just think that they're bipolar, or I just think that they're a narcissist, or I just think that they're, and I want to ask is, well, who told you that?
Right. Right.
It's like, oh, the internet.
Yeah. Social media.
The internet told me that.
I listened to a
Dr.
podcast.
Google.
Wow. Okay. Just try and keep an open mind if you really want to help. But maybe that's probably part of the problem is that when you're quick to latch on to a diagnosis, perhaps you don't want to help.
Well, I always see the best in people. So I think it's
I don't.
I know.
That's why you're not a therapist.
She's the eternal optimist, in case you hadn't noticed.
So I don't think it's they don't want to help. It's they've tried everything. It's when a spouse comes in and says my husband is a narcissist, she's just deeply hurt and really betrayed, and it's possible he is a narcissist. I'm not saying he's not, but you're right. It is so quickly thrown out there. So easily people will read a book and say, oh my gosh, like this is my husband, or this is my wife. And there was something I was going to say.
Well, I mean, I think it goes without saying that all men at some point think their wife is crazy.
Yes.
We
But
know
that-
it, and vice
That doesn't mean that it's not because we're sane. You know, I mean, it could be that, you know, they're just normal and you're irritated. It
and wives think their
especially with the whole
husbands are
bipolar
narcissists.
thing. I can't tell you how many women that I have heard being accused of being bipolar.
Oh, yeah. So
It's just
So that diagnosis, actually, I mean, there really truly is medication that helps with bipolar. So it is a real medical condition.
and it's obvious.
Well, the thing is, we can all look a little bipolar at times, but the criteria, which I don't have the DSM in front of me, to meet all of those criteria, I mean, there needs to be a really significant history of not being able to sleep up for, days on end, and, that's not drug induced, those types of things.
Mhm.
But, and it needs to happen repetitively. So you need a long history for someone who's bipolar to really, truly give them that diagnosis. And then, a psychiatrist who does medication would be able to prescribe medication that would significantly help alleviate those symptoms. So, someone who's just acting bipolar because they're angry and irate,
Right.
it's
I think my point is that husbands and wives stop diagnosing each other.
yes, for
Just
sure.
stop.
Yeah.
Just stop diagnosing each other. You don't read a book and then become an expert on bipolarism,
Right.
okay? And then diagnose your husband with bipolar disorder because he's a jerk.
Right.
I mean, maybe he's just a jerk. I mean, that's
Well,
a possibility.
Maybe we're all sinners and
To the
selfish.
point.
not that.
More to the point is that yes.
Yeah, to Chris's point, I read a book,
Right.
and and every man that walked into my office after that was a narcissist.
Right.
It was like guilty until proven innocent, and it became very difficult actually for me to, be fair to
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
after seeing this,
Right.
from a pastor, psychologist for 30 years and saying, this is what's going on. This is what I've seen after 30 years. And so
Right.
it's like, okay, it's got to be true.
Yeah.
So don't go
But
read
most-
one on borderline personality
Yeah.
disorder,
Oh, come
because all
on,
the
man.
women are going to be borderline when they walk through the door.
It must be true because I read it.
Right.
Yeah. So it must be true for all people.
But with that said, we don't want to stop doing our reading and our researching and our looking and making sure that, okay, this guy said this, but he left a few things out. Let's keep reading.
Yeah.
Let's keep educating ourselves,
Right.
and which has been one of your big
Yeah.
pushes for our counseling group.
Just don't
is-
qualify
yeah.
yourself as more than you are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and as a therapist who is trained and educated in diagnosing, even therapists are very careful throwing out diagnosis. I mean, it is, most therapists are going to tell you they're just wanting to look at the person, not
Mm-hmm.
the diagnosis. And really, diagnosis came about because of insurance. It was
Yeah.
a way of payment.
Yeah,
So
that's sad.
and therapy was trying to belong to the medical field, because when you have doctors, they have diagnosis. So it's a way of talking amongst other professionals about characteristics.
And being credible.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
do you think it was a means by which to create bona fides for the psychological kind of therapy kind of vocation?
I think there could be that possibility. Yeah. I don't know the history on when the DSM came about, actually. I'm sure I had a class on it, but
Yeah.
You didn't pay attention
No.
that day.
So getting to what we kind of want to go over today and connection with our other two podcasts on mental health in the church, which I would encourage you to go onto our website or onto our podcast platforms and check those out. Mental Health in the Church Part 1 and 2. Pretty helpful information in there as well. But in recent national surveys, there's been a report that America's teens and young adults are experiencing very high levels of mental distress, violence, and substance abuse. In some cases, the highest ever recorded. So in this, our third installment of our series on the mental health in the church, we want to kind of delve into that and see what's going on with that. So in a CDC survey in 2021, Youth Risk Behavior Survey was the first one collected since the start of COVID-19 after the pandemic. And noticeably absent from this CDC survey. Now, I didn't understand this, Ken. So noticeably absent from the survey is any mention of transgender students. Are we talking about in the teen girl segment, or did they kind of separate transgender into its own category and exclude it from teen girls, teen boys, and then have its own kind of category?
Yes.
Okay. Now
So if you see the second heading down there is LGBTQ plus, there's no T in there. And they use that
interesting.
consistently throughout all of the research. They leave the T out.
Mhm.
So that I just found that very interesting that they did not include that in the statistics that they were tracking here.
Well, when we go to look at the numbers for the LGBTQ youth or the LGBTQ plus youth,
they're
Yes.
changing it.
well, that's because they
Yeah.
excluded the teen or the transgender
Mhm.
out of that. Probably you'll see why they did that, because the numbers would be way worse.
Yes.
I'm suspecting they either didn't want that to skew the numbers, or they were going to have a separate survey just on transgender youth that
Well-
they wanted to highlight. And
I think ultimately they
Helps
want to
boys.
create a new sex. They want to create a non-binary
Mm.
sex, a transgender sex, so that there you have male, female, transgender. I think is ultimately what they want to do, and so there probably is a driving force in that as well.
yeah.
Sure
You know,
there's-
to normalize that thought process. But we were talking before, how it's interesting that, they want to talk about the science. Let's talk about the science. Let's talk about the science. But then when you're confronted with the science, it's like, well, why are we looking at the science? Did you ever see that that video of the high school biologist who was debating with two LGBTQ activists? I should have queued that video up. In fact, when you guys are having a conversation, I might cue that video up so we can play the audio on it, because his response to them is so brilliant. And when he's done talking, the transgender girl, she goes, well, why are we just looking at the science? It's like,
Yeah. Slippery.
Yeah. So that's out there, right? I mean, I'm hoping that logic will win out. I'm hoping that normal people are rejecting this on a regular basis. If anything, if the decline of Disney shows anything, it shows that normal people are just like, nah, we're not accepting this. We're done with this. I mean, they just took a $300 million hit on this most recent movie because of the nonsense that's being pushed in it, So, and the reason that is because people are just like, you know
We're
what?
tired of it.
I don't care. If you want to go out and pretend that you're the opposite sex or whatever the case may be, You go out and live your life and do whatever it is that you're going to do, but don't come into my household and try and force your stuff on me. You stay away from me. Right. And I think that's the way that most people are getting, unfortunately, which is probably why you see a lot of these kind of statistics like you're seeing. It's backlash and people are just done.
I think COVID definitely woke a lot of parents up about the school system and the education because they started seeing what their kids were actually, what the teachers were teaching as they were streaming the students at home. They could, and they started to see the books. Because a lot of the schools, the kids don't bring their books home, so the parents aren't able to look at what's being taught. The universities are just another area that. So I hope that people will wake up to the reality and just completely reject it. But I am concerned about our young generation, the medical schools, every institution is being attacked with this ideology. And it's really a religion.
Yeah.
When you truly look at it, it's a belief system because there's, they reject the science. When you start to go to science.
Yeah, it turns into a faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a religion. And it's not, I think parents, if you had put a name of this is the Muslim religion, or, this is, if you'd put a name on it, people would have known quicker what was happening. But because it was kind of sneaky how it came in and under public health, sex education, parents are like, oh yeah, well, our kids all need to know that. Well, they're really not.
I don't have to tell them. Oh, good. You tell them.
They're getting a lot more than sex education.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I think that
agenda.
the people who are really invested in it are probably academia, some medical professions. Some of them are doing it primarily just because their insurance is requiring that they do it, or that they adhere to it, and a lot of younger people. But blue collar, white collar world, they're not making any ground in that area. It's just people are just fed up with it. My concern is that there is going to be a rise in backlash, even perhaps violent backlash, because of the aggressive push of these activists to force people to do things. You're not going to get, a person saying, well, I'm going to protest because you can't force me to say pronouns that I don't want to use.
Right.
You're just going to get somebody who's going to get punched in the face.
Right.
And something to really think about,
Well, at my last training for emotionally focused therapy, this was last spring, even with it. So now they want us to put pronouns on our name tag.
Oh boy.
I refuse. I just put name.
Good.
But anyway, I'm not a confrontational person, but when I'm pushed to a point, I am going to refuse. I will dig my heels in the sand and say, no, I'm not going to participate in that. Fortunately, no one confronted me directly, but even within the trainings, they're wanting you to always include transgender LGBTQ couples. It's a huge push.
They're not recognizing that as a mental disorder then.
No, it's no longer.
Wow.
No.
Yeah, gender dysphoria is no longer a thing.
It's not. Yeah.
It's a thing. It's just not recognized
cured.
as a problem.
It's not discussed.
Cured.
Yeah.
COVID cured it.
It's actually it's my field in psychology is really it's part of the activist. There's a lot of activists, and it's almost becoming. And if you're not, you're a hater. You're a transphobe.
Yeah.
You're a bigot. To the institution of marriage is not sacred at all. Open relationships is completely accepted and promoted. And if open relationships have conflict or, it's any, you wouldn't even call it marital issues. It's like you have an open relationship that they're hurt because the other one's betrayed them. It's like, well, they're in an open relationship, but it's
how can I possibly betray you? We
Yeah.
don't really have a
Yeah.
quote unquote relationship.
Or where one wants the open relationship and the other doesn't. It's really,
Yeah, that's terrifying. Yeah, I had a thought and then I lost it. That just happens these days.
Well, you got what we're talking about now. There's so many things rolling around in my head.
Yeah,
I just want to run screaming down the hall there.
yeah. There's just so much going on with that, and you have to wonder how long it's going to be until you reach a critical mass with that, and you see the ramifications of that, and it just amazes me that in a world that touts itself as being so in favor of science, that they're so readily willing to reject science
right.
in order to accept this ideology. And there's so much, I don't know, do you call it hypocrisy? Maybe hypocrisy. In the way that it is approached, that there's no consistency.
It's almost like there's a new form of tolerance. You have the religion of science, but you also have the religion of trans, and they agree to coexist. One's not dependent on the other.
Yeah, it's like they're
You do you, I'll do me. And
it's
let's
like
not
they're
fight about it.
Baptist and they're Presbyterian and they're just choosing to work with each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what you were saying earlier about the LGBT transgender ideology specifically is now part of the psychology training, and it's being accepted.
Oh, it's more than accepted. It's the standard.
It's the standard,
Yeah.
okay, and
If you go against it, you are
Going to-
ignorant and
swimming upstream.
Homophobic.
homophobic,
Yeah.
transphobic.
Is it kind of a new enlightenment?
They're trying to tout it as
Well,
that,
it's
probably.
I was going towards the science thing. That will now be touted as science.
right.
So the science is no longer the science. The science is what you were saying. It's
It's
faith.
relative too.
It's relative.
It's science,
Um,
whatever I call it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's funny because you'll get a group of people, they'll bash people who believe in, say, for instance, a flat earth, right? And they'll say, "Oh, you ignorant fool, you don't," and I'm not a flat earther by any stretch, but the principle is that same person that will bash the flat earther for being an idiot will then turn right around and declare with 100% clarity that there are more than two genders
Mm-hmm.
Right.
against all scientific evidence.
Bash the biologist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We live in a world where there is no standard, there is no order. We live in a world of endless potential.
There is, but we've rejected it as a society.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting to. When you begin to remove the moorings of order, and you give yourself over to chaos, you should not be surprised that chaos is what you receive. And that's why do you think that there's a continuing list of genders and gender types and pronouns growing? It's because when you have unlimited potential or chaos, and you try to make order out of chaos with chaos, then you just have more potential being created, more chaos being created. And so you'll never get to the end of it. You'll just be creating genders for the rest of eternity, creating pronouns for the rest of eternity. Neo-pronoun will be a new master's degree that you can have to master neo-pronouns. It's just unending. And so no wonder that our kids are looking at all of this and going, well, there's nothing here for me.
Yeah.
There's nothing here for me.
Or just completely confused. They're just left with so much chaos. It's quite confusing and perplexing. They're changing the words and the meanings of the words. So kids are being led to believe that sex, being male or female, is randomly assigned.
Mhm.
They're told, the doctor might tell you what you are at birth, but then you get to decide what you are.
As if the doctor assigning your gender just was like, let's go male.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a random assignment that was given to you. And so now that you're growing up, you get to decide this. I mean, this is what they're being taught. You can be whatever you want to be.
Yeah.
And it's very confusing. And they prey on kids who are vulnerable, who are from families that are split, who have a lot of, already emptiness and aren't fitting in at school. So
Yeah.
those are the kids that end up going to a counselor or teacher who's then an activist who's saying, well, here, come join us. You'll fit in here.
Mhm.
And there's this social contagion that's happening. And COVID, the shutdown and the isolation really preyed upon this social contagion of gender ideology. It's like it just was fuel to the fire that was already there.
Yeah.
It's the gang mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want
I
to
can
fit
go
in.
here and fit in and
Yeah.
they'll protect me.
Yeah. So if anyone is having mental health distress or issues, a kid especially, and they're seeking help and they come across a group of people who are confused and, well, come join
Just
us.
as bad off
Yeah.
as they are.
So just,
Come, let's be dysfunctional together.
but they don't see it as they're calling it,
Yeah.
come be part of our group. You don't have to.
They have compassion.
Yeah, it's no longer an issue. It's not a disorder anymore.
No.
You're
Self-real-
completely normal if you have no idea what gender you are. And
Self-realization, right?
Yeah.
You're just discovering who you really have always been.
Yeah.
And nobody had the guts to tell you.
on the inside. Yeah.
Well, and what adolescent or pre-adolescent, has, all of us have confusion
Yeah.
when we're going through that stage of life. We don't like our bodies. We don't like the changes that are happening. This is normal. And instead of normalizing those normal changes that everyone goes through, they're saying, you can change it to whatever you want it to be and come be part of this group.
Right.
And
And I think we did. I mean, I can recall thinking, girls hate me, but all these guys, they accept me for who I am.
right.
And so you start building those kinds of bonds, and then at some point you realize, wait a minute,
Yeah.
she's pretty. Something happened. Okay, maybe I'm not that way.
Yeah.
And I think most guys, go through a period of time when, as with girls,
Yes, girls do.
that, hey, I bond to these girls.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
actually-
remember in the 60s, in the 70s, girls holding hands,
Yeah.
going down the street, going someplace was never, your thought process was, oh,
Yeah.
they're best friends.
Yeah.
Now it's like, I wonder.
I know. It's sad. My daughters hold hands with their friends,
Mhm.
and it's completely innocent.
Yeah.
And I want to preserve that for them. I don't want it to be anything else but friendship,
Yeah.
And it's just sad. Our worlds would prey upon
Yeah.
those vulnerabilities. And, one diagnosis, autistic children, this have a really vulnerable, a vulnerability to the transgender and this binary sex thing, because it's actually part of the diagnosis. There is some gender confusion within the autistic spectrum. Anyway.
There's an easy prey.
Yeah.
And we're seeing more autism
Yeah. Right.
based on aluminum cans or something, right?
Given that cause and effect exists, how much of the current transgender movement is an effect that was caused by the disdain for homosexuality in the early ages of American life? We, I mean, in looking through history, homosexuality has always been a thing. That's nothing. That's not a new thing.
Right.
There's always been homosexuality, but there seems to be in not even just American culture, in most cultures, there seems to be this disdain for that particular sin that creates a hatred in people, a disgust. I even find myself feeling that way sometimes when, I'm watching TV or something and I see a gay couple. You see that a lot now, just commercials after commercials. It's just, and my initial knee-jerk reaction is always a revulsion, because it's not natural, and it's all the things that you might feel, right? But when you throw at something hatred for so long at a group of people, you should not be surprised when you have a cause or you have an effect that is caused by something. And the only reason I'm saying that, I don't think that anybody has anything to apologize for. I mean, it's wrong. Obviously, it's sinful. Were we kind to people that were given in that sin? Probably not. Were we more apt to be forgiving of other people that were in other types of sins? Probably. Was there a moment when Christianity was unfairly kind to one group of people and unfairly unjust to another group of people? Yeah, absolutely there was. And that, I think, probably was something that caused the effect of what we're seeing today. You don't get activism unless there's a reason to be active. If there's no hatred, there's no disdain, there's no anger, there's no bitterness, then there's no reason to be activated against something. But that being said, how do you begin to navigate a solution to the transgender issue if they're being pushed this in public schools and in colleges and everything else?
Yeah, I was just in some of the research that I was doing, came across an author that I haven't read the book because I just came across it, but it's Dr. Miriam Grossman, and she has a book that she's written in 2023 that was published called Trans Nation, and she has lots of advice for parents to help kind of inoculate their children against this ideology. And she says to help your children understand their biologically affirm them and who God has created them. Now, she doesn't use that term, God created. I don't know if she's a believer or not, but she's a medical doctor and adolescent psychiatrist. So she's seen a lot in her practice. So anyway, it's a good resource for those out there.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to read that because I'd like to see how a secular person approaches that concept, because they may approach it from the standpoint of, we're affirming your biological gender, even though you may feel homosexual.
She does address that, girls, there's not one way to be a girl and there's not one way to be a boy. And so what happens is you want to tell your girls, not all girls are going to want to be princesses and do teas and dress up.
Right.
There are girls who love sports and, anyway, tomboys, we all call them. That doesn't mean that they're transgendered. It doesn't mean they're not a girl. So she does kind of talk about that. As parents, we need to help them understand there's not just one way.
Yeah, you can have a female that has masculine traits, and you can have a male that has feminine traits.
Absolutely.
And this is something that happens on a regular basis, and those people are not even confused about their sexual preferences.
Right.
I have a good friend of mine that is very feminine in kind of the way he approaches life. He's by no stretch confused about his sexual orientation. Just has feminine traits and likes things that are feminine sometimes. And, here in North Idaho, it's not uncommon to find a female that has masculine traits.
Right.
It's one of the reasons why love and respect is so difficult for women up here, because the women, as they look at couples in chairs, they don't necessarily feel like they fit into that criteria. Like, because he has it listed out, it's like, these are the things that your wife desperately needs, that you need to, that fill air into her air hose or whatever. Right. And then the women are looking at it and going, no, I don't know. That doesn't do anything for me.
Right.
And so it's not necessarily cut and dry, but that doesn't mean that you have to be confused about gender in order to understand that. You can be a boy and have a sexual preference for another boy, even though from our perspective, biblically, that would be sinful and unhealthy. That's something that has and will continue to happen for the rest of time until Jesus returns. So I think that's an interesting approach, something to think about.
Yeah.
And the other side of that discussion might be, if you begin to backpedal on one thing, then are you backpedaling on another? It's like, are you justifying homosexuality because you want to compromise with transgenderism? That's another thing to be careful of as well. You don't have to look at it as compromise, I don't think. Not at all.
No, I think knowing God has created us all differently and unique, not one of us are the same.
And all of us struggle with sin.
Right.
Some of us may struggle with homosexuality. Some of us may struggle with lust. Some of us may struggle with greed. Some of us may struggle with, gossip or worry, or, there's any myriad of things that we might struggle with.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you reject science because you feel a certain way. I think that's what it boils down to. So to get into this and just to get kind of the insight that Lisa might have on some of these things, I'll just read these statistics for you. So teen girls, almost 1 in 5 teen girls experienced sexual violence in the past year, a significant increase from 2017.
Okay, I got to jump in here.
Yeah.
7 granddaughters.
Yeah.
And they've left out, as you said, the transgender in these statistics. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just cannot believe that statistic is even close to being accurate, because when you add in the transgender people, that violence is going to increase.
Well,
I think you have to define violence.
Yeah, and
that's
probably
that
pretty
was the next
broadly
part
defined.
of this.
that's what I was
Yeah.
going to
It
get
could
at.
be verbal, it could be physical, it could
Well,
be
they're saying
sexual.
sexual.
Yeah. And any
But that can be
well, that could be you got hit on by a
yeah.
guy in today's society.
or cussed at.
I had a young lady last night. We were leaving the church, and she had asked me, she was interested in this guy, and she was like, is it okay for a girl to go and kind of, for all intents and purposes, make the first move, go and ask them if they're interested or they want to go out or whatever, and I thought about it because, traditionally, it's always the guy that goes and pursues that. But, one of the things I told her is, like, in today's society, that's going to become more and more common, because guys are going to be less likely now to pursue a girl because of all the risks that are involved. You can't, if you say the wrong thing at any given moment, she's going to assume that that's either violence or sexual abuse, and then either report you or dox you or put you on Instagram, blast you out to everyone. It's a nasty world out there. My boys are always telling me about some of the things that they have experienced in the world that they live in. And unfortunately, I mean, one of them has been fortunate to find a young lady that he really likes, and she's a really good girl. But one of my boys, he's just like, I have no interest in pursuing any girls at all. From a 19-year-old man,
Right.
I mean, that's wrong.
So do you think my impression is it's social media that has made this so dangerous for all our teens.
Yeah, 100%.
Girls are on the other side of that, afraid of being preyed upon, or violated somehow. Photos of them, anything. So yeah, social media seems to have really escalated and made this a very dangerous environment for our young people.
And we've known that for 20 years now.
Right.
Once it started, and it's just, been
Well,
snowballing.
Yeah.
And the only answer is to just completely cut it off.
Right.
And good luck with that.
Yeah,
in
we tried to
today's
control
society.
it, and it hasn't worked.
Well, you can't control something. It's like the internet. You can't control the internet.
Nope.
We had to learn how to utilize the internet wisely. And social media is kind of that same thing. You kind of have to learn to utilize it wisely.
Yeah.
And we probably do not do enough education on the safe and proper use of social media.
Just going to ask that question because that's where we're at in our children's stage of life. They know no social media.
Yeah.
And, they're getting older and it's like, I can't protect them forever. There's, how do I teach them to do this safely? And we need that.
Yeah.
Maybe
need Al
that's what we
Gore.
should do.
I mean, he started it, right? He can shut it down.
You need to have a mechanism by which you can instruct children and parents. It's like, this is the world we live in, guys. There's no point in fussing and bickering about it. This is the world we live in. This is the language of the people.
Right.
And so how do you navigate it is the wise thing. And there are people that navigate social media wisely. And there's probably some things that you can do to enhance that, and there's some things that you can do to make that better. But there's not really a lot of education out there.
Well, let's start
as far as social media is concerned.
I derailed us on these statistics, and I think sometimes statistics can educate people when they go, "Oh, really? I had no clue." So, do we want to get back on track there?
Well, yeah. Well, for sure. Now you're derailing the conversation in the other direction.
Well, I thought it was.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Shall we vote on that, guys?
Go ahead.
So the social media has really changed relationships. So our young kids now, social media is how they relate to their peers. Texting has changed communication. So it's really where you used to have to write letters and mail them to people.
Or have a face-to-face conversation.
Face-to-face conversation. You drove to their home. You actually met in coffee shops. You didn't FaceTime. You had to pick up the phone and actually hear their voice, call them. Because when you're just communicating through instant message or texting, you don't have the tone of voice. You miss out on so much. So anyway, it's that. Why are our kids so isolated? It's like, I wonder.
Yeah.
They don't know how to relate.
Just real quick. Last night, we're having an early Thanksgiving with two of our kids and their families because of the timing. And so we WhatsApped, which is, for those that you don't know, is like FaceTime, our family in Houston. And so there's such a plus to that, to be able to share the chaos that was going on with people that are, thousands of miles away.
Right.
Well, I would say that's face-to-face conversation, though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's the positive side of what we want to say, hey, no more of this.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
but
it's abused.
You'll see people sitting at a table texting each other.
Yeah.
At the table rather than talking.
Picture this. Several granddaughters and grandsons and sons and daughters all sitting around the living room with their phones in their face, but they're all playing a game.
Yes. Oh, that's
together. And I was sitting there going, "Oh, this is great. I love this."
My kids will have friends over to play games on their tablets.
Yep.
Yeah.
So 1 in 5 girls experienced sexual violence in the past year. More than 1 in 10 teen girls reported they had ever been forced to have sex. This measure increased for the first time since CDC began monitoring this measure. 3 in 5 girls felt persistently sad and hopeless, a marker for depressive symptoms in 2021, increasing substantially from 2011.
Okay, I hate to do this, but the statistics have always been, as long as I can remember, 1 in 3 women have been sexually abused. So that statistic, 1 in 10, makes me go, wait a minute.
Well, this is just teens, not all women.
Okay.
Yeah, this
So
is just teen
1 in
girls.
3 for all women's probably.
Yeah. Well, what I'm
Close.
saying, the interesting part is most of these women, the 1 in 3, it happened in their teen years or preteen, actually, in some cases. So anyway, just a thought.
Well, I think that would be a hard metric to get to
Yeah.
because, I mean, how many of them are actually going to say, yeah, I was forced to have sex?
Well, and who are they asking? Are they
Yeah.
asking people coming out of clinics, that are already
yeah.
vulnerable?
Yeah. That's kind of the thing about statistics. We were having this conversation earlier. It's like, if you want a statistic, just go out and find it.
Right.
Because it's just out there.
Yeah.
You can find a statistic for anything that you
72%
Are
of
made up.
all statistics are made up on the
Yeah,
spot.
yeah.
But going on the persistently sad and hopeless statistic there, that it has increased from 2011. 2011, that was 10 years where social media was younger. I would wonder what part of social media and all of the technology has played an impact on that sad and hopelessness.
I'd hazard to guess 90%.
Yeah,
That's where they are.
right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reticent to place all the blame on social media, or even a large portion of it, because social media is just a platform.
It's just a
It's
reflection
just
of
a
the heart.
thing. It's not. What is more concerning is the way that the people are using the tool. So it's not necessarily that it's social media. It's that when you create an atmosphere where you live in an echo chamber and you have no consequences for saying whatever you want, then that's when you have an issue. Without that contact, there's no consequence for bad behavior. So, it's no wonder that you get onto a chat room and you're talking to people trying to find affirmation, and then some goon comes along and says some nasty things to you because he thinks it's hilarious. And then you suddenly feel persistently sad and hopeless. It's you're looking for your affirmation in all the wrong places. But perhaps they're not getting affirmation in many other places, So if you have a teen that is looking online for some type of affirmation, then perhaps the problem isn't social media. Perhaps the problem is home. And we need to start being honest with that.
For sure.
Because a healthy house, a healthy home, you shouldn't have anything to blame it on. You can have things that come into your home that, interact with your kids and do things that are bad, but you can talk through those things and work through them. If you have someone that's persistently sad and hopeless, that's not good. And that's not just social media. That's their whole life.
Right.
They have influences somewhere, perhaps it's at school or, whatever the case may be. But man, there's so many factors that are going into that.
That would be an interesting thing to delve into, to find out where is the problem. Obviously, home is one of the big ones. But I'm still looking back as you say that. I'm going, okay, well, guns don't kill people.
Right.
People kill people.
Yeah.
The internet doesn't make people porn addicts.
But they utilize that for a lot of this.
And they designed, Facebook did a lot of marketing research. They designed it to be addictive and appealing.
Mm-hmm.
There was psychology that was put into that. And
Yeah, there's a good documentary on Netflix called Social Dilemma that everyone should check out.
Yeah.
It's really good information, and it goes into detail about how they utilize likes and utilize a lot of the tools that they have to give you dopamine hits
Yes.
to keep you coming back,
right.
to keep you engaged.
So yeah, it's not social media's fault, but it's the tool that has been used to really, I think, isolate our teens and make them sad and hopeless. But
yeah,
as
I think it
as
probably
parents-
started even farther back with just advertising,
Oh yeah.
commercial advertisements. You know,
Mhm.
they've been portraying a certain stereotype of women and men and children and family and all these things for so many years, and then it kind of went berserk. But it's still driving a lot of the image making.
you could take that even farther back. You could say that the decimation of the family and the creation of the nuclear family was the beginning of the end for children.
Yeah, that's a factor too.
You know, I mean, when you remove the mom out of the household as caregiver and you cede caregiving over to lesser people, the natural effect of that is going to be a spiraling downward of emotional well-being. You know, you can't remove the parents out of a child's life for most of their life and then expect that they're going to be okay. And they're going to be bitter and angry. And how many of these kids, you know, they're coming home, mom and dad have been at work all day long, mom and dad get home from work and they don't want to have anything to do with their kids. And so the kids, not only have they been exposed to whatever they've been exposed to at public school, but then they come home, no one's there. So what do? Well, you get online and you chat with friends and you know, get on into stuff that you shouldn't be getting into probably.
Yep.
So yeah, you know, I mean, you could trace that way on back.
Well, back to the quote unquote latchkey kids, you know, which is part of my generation.
Yeah.
We come home, both parents are working. You had free reign of the house. You didn't have internet at the time, but you still had TV and you still had sin.
Yeah.
Well,
And
boys fell into gangs,
Yeah.
girls fell into cliques.
Yeah.
Yep.
And,
You know, the tribalism wins. And
Yeah.
Boy,
right?
and there's a lot of doormats to lay the blame on. You know, I mean, you could lay the blame on feminism. You could lay the blame on transgenderism. You could lay the blame on, you know, ineffective discipleship of churches. It's not any one thing. It's a perfect storm of apathy that has been created by everyone's causes. You know, everybody has a thing, you know, so and the kids are caught up in the middle of it, you know, I think. And
They're
you know,
pursuing lesser things.
again, you know, the question becomes, you know, like, what do you do about it? You know, what do you do about the hopelessness? What do you do about the transgenderism? What do you do about, you know, all these things? Where do you turn?
I don't know. Lisa, what do we do?
My headphones went dead.
Oh, they did?
They did.
Yeah. Does that mean my mic working?
No, your mic is working.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
I can
good.
just talk. Yeah, I mean, that's where as a therapist I felt hopeless in helping people because you just reach a point, oh, it's coming back.
Is
It's
it?
weird.
I must have stepped on the cable.
Oh, there you are.
Are you back?
Wow.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
back.
Okay. I'll check that out after.
So, what was I saying? That's where the biblical counseling and really understanding God's perspective and his view of who we are, what our purpose is. I mean, we were created for a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I get in this dark world of all these problems, I go back running to what is our purpose. And when we're not living for the purpose that we were created, we're going to be hurting.
Mhm.
And our relationships are going to hurt and our kids are going to hurt.
Yeah.
And so that's where my hope is. And as I feel like I'm coming full circle. I went down the whole social sciences training and I'm finally now coming back to, okay, now I have this training, I have this understanding, but when I sit with hurting people, which has always been my passion, I have lots of mercy. I have this desire to really sit with the hurting. And I can get in that hopeless feeling. And when I'm there, it's like, no, there is hope, and our hope is in knowing what our purpose is. And
Yeah.
we're created to worship. And we're going to either worship the world or ourselves or other idols, or we're going to worship God. And so it's a worship issue.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that.
For sure, because one of the things that God tries to do is instill order in our lives, because we're always happier when we have order in our lives. And, there is a component of the world today that would say that, you're going to be happier if you just do what you want and you have all this freedom and you have all this, and basically what it boils down to is life is just filled with chaos. You have no direction. You have no kind of guiding principles. It's just every day is kind of like a whim.
Right.
And when you live that life, there's no happiness found in it.
Right.
God knew that
Yeah.
when he created the world. God knew that when he wrote the story of the gospel. And no matter how you look at it, it's pretty obvious that when a person has order in their life, they have less depression, they have less anxiety, they have less frustration. You have more happiness. And from a man's perspective, guys, especially young men that are out there struggling with perhaps mental health or whatever, one of the things that I would tell you is that the more orderly your life is, the more orderly the way that you approach life is, the more attractive you make yourself to finding a mate. It's just the way nature works. And so I think that there's something to be said about bringing it back to a biblical concept, even if you reject the theology. Let's just say, for instance, for the sake of argument, that you reject the idea of God as a literal thing, right? Just take, for instance, the order that is given to a person's life by following the precepts that Christ preached. If you just followed that, even without salvation, your life would be markedly better. The world would be markedly better.
Yeah.
I mean, but getting a person to see that.
Yeah, his precepts and conditions that we follow are so opposed to what the world is teaching.
Yeah.
That makes it difficult.
Yeah.
So, do I hear you correctly? And what you're saying is, from a secular viewpoint, mental health therapy and diagnosis in that industry basically ultimately doesn't have any hope.
Yes.
It can help you through some symptoms. It can help you understand yourself a little better. It can help you make some sense of your world, but it's ultimately not curing that true narcissist, that true bipolar, that true borderline.
Yeah.
And so that's a dead end ultimately. And the world is looking to that as they're idolizing science. They're looking for the cure in science, but it's really not there.
Yeah.
But the gospel offers you not just some treatment for your symptoms, it offers you new life.
Hope. Yeah.
A new creation.
It's almost as if they know that there's a spiritual component, but because they can't deal with the spiritual component, they make it a psychological component or a mental component. When
that higher power that Al-Anon and AA uses, it's so disconcerting because we know what it is.
It's sanitized.
They know what it is. Sanitized, yeah.
Yeah.
And they know that component is out there, but they don't want to say it.
I think because they see what I just said. They see that there is a positive there's a positive outcome when you give yourself over to order.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, there is a positive outcome, but a lot of people who don't have that relationship with Jesus that go to AA and they just view this higher power, but it's not a real relationship. The sustaining sobriety it'd be interesting
minimized.
to do the statistics on
Yeah.
that. I think it does help them to have that order, but how sustaining is that for them? It
It's
helps them for
Probably,
time,
probably not very sustaining.
right?
Yeah.
So, but there are people who go to AA and truly find Jesus,
Mhm.
right?
It's true.
And those people, I suspect, have a much more longevity of sobriety, because it's nearly not our strength that we can overcome any sin. It's God in us that helps us to overcome the sin nature that we all have, and addiction's just one of them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
The getting back to biblical counseling and getting back to biblical principles would be helpful for all people, really.
yes. Yeah.
It really truly would. And all so I'm going to rip through these statistics real quick because we're running out of time. But LGBTQ plus youth, which we've already talked about the fact that they've excluded transgender out of this. But in 2021, more than 1 in 10 of those students did not go to school because of safety concerns. 1 in 4 experienced sexual violence, and nearly 1 in 4 were bullied at school. I think that when you make yourself out to be different, you're guaranteed to be bullied at school. That's the way kids are. You know, it's kind of like prison. You got to put your head down and just do your thing, right?
Yeah.
Not draw attention.
Wear a Christian T-shirt or one that says
No.
there are only 2 genders.
You don't do anything.
Yeah.
Don't do anything, right? If you want to be not bullied and not noticed, wear bland clothing, put your head down,
Blend in.
do
Levi's
your
and
studies. You know, when people come around you that are causing problems, just like quietly walk away. You know, it's just like a prison yard.
Stay isolated.
Yeah, public school is just like prison. You got to keep your head down.
Can I tell a funny on that?
That's only partially true.
I truly have a funny on that. We were driving on Government Way when we first moved here, and my youngest, who was 8 at the time, we drove by the jail. You know what I'm talking about, right up north of Costco. And she goes,
Sheriff's
"Oh, Mom, there's a school." Not kidding. Our family laughs all the time about that.
So
I
true.
mean, it is
I know
true.
a guy
They
that
do
works
build
at
them
that
to look
school.
like they do build them to look like prisons. That's for sure. In 2021, almost half of LGBTQ students seriously considered attempting suicide. Almost half. I mean, think about that number for a second. I mean, if you had, 20 LGBTQ students in your school, 10 of them thought about suicide, seriously considered it.
So this is the statistics they like to
And
use against us.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
It's like, would you rather have a living daughter or a
Right.
dead son?
That's what they tell you.
Yeah.
So, but we know from those that have come out who've detransitioned, that have gone through the transition process, they don't get better. They don't feel better. It's not the answer. It's not what cures their problems.
Right.
And in fact, those that have gone through the transition process commit suicide still.
Yeah.
So even though the parents affirm them, society's affirming them, their groups affirming them, their mental health issues are not going away, and they're not talking about that.
Can we promote Breger U here on
Well, sure.
They have got some phenomenal videos, 5-minute videos of people that have detransitioned.
Oh.
And it's absolutely amazing to hear their stories. And they're not fun stories,
Yeah.
but there's the hope stories that we're talking about, listening to some of these people. What is really hard is seeing an attractive young woman that her voice is lower than mine,
Right.
because she went through all that therapy and everything,
Yeah.
to transition and now detransitioning. She's still bringing that in,
Oh, yeah.
and it's horrible.
And that's the other thing. There's no informed consent for these kiddos that are going through this transition process, how it's, really going to wreak havoc on their bodies and the medical issues that are coming,
Yeah.
that are
Yeah,
permanent.
what happens to their bodies
Yeah.
is
It's
amazing.
hard to believe that there are doctors out there that are actually pushing the agenda that to help this child, I must cut off their organs.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's mind-boggling to me that this is something that's happening in today's society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not considered abusive.
No.
If you want to
Neither
really
is
be blown
abortion.
away, go to Oregon Health Sciences University and read about some of the cosmetic surgeries they perform, it's ghastly.
Yeah.
It's Frankenstein stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. And they're very, very proud of it.
Oh. Yeah,
Oregon
look,
who?
Oregon Health Sciences University in Portland.
I don't know if I want to read that.
Yeah.
It'll mess with your head.
Yeah. So the survey recommends some actions that you can do to help take students. You ready for these?
Yeah.
Increasing the sense among all students that they are cared for, supported, and belong at school. The proven health benefits of this approach, called school connectedness, are well demonstrated and can last well beyond their teenage years. However, youth who are racial and ethnic minorities, experience racism, and who identify as LGBTQ+ often feel less connected at school. Effective programs include approaches like providing safe and trusted adults, such as mentors or trained teachers, and connecting teens to their peers and the communities through clubs and community outreach. These programs help kids know they matter and are not alone.
The interesting point of that to me was there's no mention of the home.
Mm-mm.
It's all
Yeah.
about the state can fix this.
Yes.
You just
Mhm.
need
Yep.
to help them connect better with the state and its programs, and this will all go away.
I was just going to say that the way I read that is give us more time with your kids so that we can spend more time with them and indoctrinate them.
We
That's
can
what I
do
got
that,
out of
yeah.
that.
Yep.
Yeah. Increasing access to needed health services, including mental health and substance use prevention services, whether provided on-site or through connecting youth and families to community-based sources of care.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is in Washington State. 13-year-olds now have a right to receive medical care without parental consent. So the school could literally connect your kid to a mental health professional without you ever knowing that that's happened.
And they could put them onto a doctor who could put them onto puberty blockers, and you would never
Absolutely.
even know until you started seeing the effects of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's see. Implementing quality health education that is medically accurate, developmentally appropriate, culturally and LGBTQ+ inclusive, and grounded in science can help prevent violence and reduce mental health challenges by equipping teens with essential knowledge and skills such as negotiating sexual consent, managing emotions, and recognizing and asking for the help they need. It's weird that they include like all these kind of, ask for sexual consent, how do you negotiate that, managing your emotions, as well as LGBTQ+ inclusiveness grounded in science.
Yeah.
It's like they're conflating these two things together as if they're part of the same equation. And no, I'm sorry, transgender, transitioning is not the same as negotiating sexual consent. Those are not equals. They're not even close. One's medical, and the other one is not. And so it's weird they kind of draw these kind of blurred lines between all these things, as trying to interconnect them so that it's like, okay, well, yeah, if your kid is struggling with negotiating sexual consent, just bring them on in and we'll talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
And of course, what they're going to be talking about is things that are medically accurate, developmentally appropriate, culturally, and LGBTQ+ inclusive.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? It's inclusive to that.
And they can fit that all under health education.
Yep. Noticeably absent from all these recommendations is strengthening the family, combating fatherlessness, resisting social media influence, and faith-based initiatives. In fact, if you bring up the fatherlessness issue, you are automatically labeled a racist.
Right.
Yep. Because one group of people tends to struggle with fatherlessness more than other groups of people. And you can't comment on that because if you do, then you are somehow racist, even though you're just pointing out a data point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or oppressive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Department of Justice statistics. According to National Crime Survey 2017 to 2020, only about 58% of violent victimizations of lesbian or gay persons was reported to police.
How do you get a statistic like that?
That was my first question. It's like, how do you know
what?
if it's never been reported? Are you just
and it
guessing?
wasn't 50, 60, or 70. It was 58%.
Yeah, it's pretty
the Department
pretty,
of Justice.
pretty specific.
Trust 'em.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Trust them.
why.
Yeah, only 58% of what we received was actually what was out there. There was a lot more out there. Trust me. The rate of violent victimization of lesbian or gay persons was more than 2 times the rate for straight persons. So, in comparison, 43.5 per 1,000 for lesbian and gay, 19 per 1,000 for straight.
So
Interesting. Well, I mean, there's something to be said there. You know, is they are they being targeted by straight people, or is there just something that's inherently violent about it? You know, I mean, that doesn't give any context for why that is. It just you can make a lot of assumptions based on that.
I think this survey just mostly points out it's a huge problem.
Yeah,
It's bigger than we thought,
yeah.
and it's not getting better. It's
The
getting worse.
the rate of victimization against transgender persons is 51.5 per 1,000. It was 2.5 times the rate among cisgender persons, which is 20.5 per 1,000. That's violent victimization. Domestic violence was 8 times as high among bisexual persons. Well, that's an
their
interesting
problem.
statistic, isn't it?
domestic.
Perhaps that might be where a lot of your violence is coming from.
Maybe.
If it's 8 times higher among bisexuals and twice as high among lesbian and gay persons than it was among straight, it could be that a lot of your violence is coming from domestic abuse.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Just a thought.
Food for thought. There's a whole thing on Pew Research. You know, we'll try and put some of this stuff in a place where it's accessible, but you know, there's so much that we have to deal with. It's kind of like dealing with the school system. It's like, where do you even begin?
Mm-hmm.
But where do you begin, Lisa? Where do you start?
I go back. I go back to, why was I created? What's my purpose? I think you start with the family. It seems that the family and isolation issues are really big factors. Male masculinity and the male's role in the family has been completely attacked. You know, but I come from a Christian perspective, so it's hard to say it. To me, that feels like the foundation. We have to go back and rebuild the foundation of the family, and family is important. And I feel like the transgender LGBTQ is trying to take away the family. It's that chaos, and so we have to come back to family is important to our mental health. And if we have weak families, our society is going to be weak. And kids aren't going to know where to go. And they're going to turn to other things. And it's just like chaos is building upon chaos.
And if we look at these statistics, they have so many different places to turn to that it doesn't eliminate the confusion. Right. It increases.
Yeah, we just keep throwing more money into the mental health field and into the chemical dependency field. And I mean, just money is just getting thrown and thrown and thrown into helping people. Mm-hmm. But what's being thrown into families? Are we, what if we put all that money into the families and allowed moms to stay home with their kids?
Mm-hmm.
That's a concept.
Yeah. Or dads.
Yeah. Someone.
Someone.
One of them.
Someone.
Yeah, I would say that adding on to that, when you had mentioned masculinity, is the promotion of gender roles again. Justifying. Well, no, justifying's not even the right word. We shouldn't have to justify things that are right.
Right.
God created a complementary structure.
Yeah.
And that complementary structure is important. And it's, why would there be happiness if you deteriorated the way things were designed to be? Now, that doesn't mean that, a woman can't choose to work or a guy can't choose to be at home, or whatever. I mean, I think that can happen. I don't think that there's ultimately a way to find happiness in that, because it flies in the face of gender roles. And it's been my experience that when you have a role reversal like that, there's significant problems in the marriage. But that being said, promoting that again as the right path and giving people an inoculation for the chaos that is out there, I think is pretty important. I like how you put that, inoculating them, equipping parents to inoculate their children against the things that are out there.
Yeah.
Social media, transgenderism. I hesitate to use the word woke anymore because it's just been way overused. But, all the ideologies that kind of flow in that stream, feminism, third wave feminism, homosexuality, transgenderism, systemic racism, critical race theory, all the kind of things that kind of are in that stream, giving them the knowledge they need to be able to understand that. And man, one of the things you can do to help you with that is listen to things like PragerU, and Daily Wire has some great programs that help you to understand, how you can begin to think about these things a little bit differently. But parents need to be engaged in that.
Yes.
You can't just give up on it and say, nah, I want to do it. And I hate to say it, but you need to add that as well as your Bible study.
Yeah.
You can't be absent from the world and just kind of make a monastery where you are just reading the Bible and praying every day. If you lived in a world where there were no other people,
Right.
that might work. In fact, that would work brilliantly. But you have to bring the Bible into the context of the life that you are living in. And so the Bible is good by itself, but you need the context to apply it to in your actual life. And that's what we used to call application, but you don't hear that word a lot anymore. But you need to apply it to your life. I think that's probably a really good place to start as parents.
Yeah. All of those forces, movements that you just listed, they all try to answer the identity question, who you are fundamentally and absolutely in absolute terms. The Bible does that.
Yes.
The other ones don't. They
leave it up to you.
Yeah,
It's
they
all
leave
relative.
it up to you.
What
You
feels
get to
good.
decide who you are and who your identity is, and that can be confusing to anybody of any age.
Sure.
But the Bible tells you absolutely who you are, and you can base your life on that. And surveys, all these surveys are pointing out discontentment, disillusionment, frustration, confusion, mental illness. The surveys among Christians always, all the ones that I've seen, show a high degree of contentment and happiness and peace among Christians, believing, practicing Christians.
Yeah.
And so you want to look at the science, you want to look at the numbers, well, look at those numbers. They point you to the Bible.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, do you have any last words for us?
I can't think of anything. I appreciate being on here. It was a real honor to come and just be with you today and have this conversation, because it is definitely something I'm passionate about, especially being a mom raising her children. This affects so much of our future and the generation to come.
Yeah, for sure. Ken?
I'll just stand on my last.
Yeah, that was well said.
I don't know if I could add anything more to that, really. I mean, I'm hoping that this episode adds a little bit of clarity and illumination to some people in areas of their lives. And it's probably not going to be our last on this subject. This seems to be an ongoing, growing thing. So we'll probably have some more episodes and try and bite off another chunk of this whole issue because it is so vast and pervasive in the church as well as in the secular world. So stay tuned, and I hope to bring you more.
Yeah. Well, that'll do it for us today.
Wait a minute.
I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Greg.
I knew he was going to do that. That's
No, you did not.
Yeah,
You did not.
Yeah, I figured he's going to bypass me. Listening audience, you've heard Lisa's heart today, and as I said earlier, she's taken the helm of our counseling ministry here at Athol Baptist Church. So you've heard a lot today, and if you have questions, if you have concerns, if you would like to engage any of us, please do so. You can do it via Lisa Direct or any of the pastors here. And we are also looking to train more people. So if you have a heart like Lisa's to sit with people that are hurting and, share their burden so that it can be divided, please contact us because, as Ken said, this is pervasive and it's ongoing and it may be growing. And the one place we don't want it to grow is in the church. We want to be able to reach out and help people that are hurting, and in the name of Christ.
Amen. Amen. Well, I'll leave you with Proverbs chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. My son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart. So you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil, for it will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. Well, that about does it for us today. As always, thank you for joining us. If you have a comment or a question or an idea for an episode, send us an email at 3p@atholbaptistchurch.org, and Ken will be thrilled to answer your email. If your idea gets used on a show, you could be the proud recipient of the now world-famous 3P coffee mug, just so you know. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thank you, Athol Baptist Church and its members, for their generous support of this ministry. And again, thank you for listening. And until next time, remember the Great Commission. Go into all the world, reach the lost with the gospel, and build disciples who can do the same. And with that, we are out.